So now defining the non-authoritative application. The similar way how we have defined the authoritative application, but two things that will be varied. Okay, what are they? Firstly, define the application, select the connector type, define the account schema. Excuse me. So define the group schemas. So define group schemas means like any permissions or any rights that you have that you will be defining over this particular place, and specify account correlation. Okay, so this is very important in every non-authoritative application. If you remember, in the authoritative application, we have configured manager correlation, right? So in the non-authoritative application, we would be configuring the account correlation. Okay, so every non-authoritative application, you should configure this account correlation. Okay, and this account correlation, what it does, it will correlate, or it will create a relationship between a non-authoritative application with authoritative application data. In the authoritative application, for example, if you have the data like employee ID, first name, last name. Okay, in the non-authoritative application, what data you should have it, like for example, some user ID, entitlement, name, first name, this kind of a data is there. Okay, so here in the authoritative application, we have employee ID. In the non-authoritative application, we have a user ID column. So these two contains the same data. What it means is like in the authoritative, in the non-authoritative, one key value should be common. So if that key value is common, and that key value only we will be passing it for the correlation logic. Okay, we will tell Sailpoint whenever this employee ID equals to this particular user ID, then the entitlements, the corresponding entitlements that are added in the non-authoritative application should get assigned to the authoritative system. So that's how this account correlation goes like. Next, defining the rules. So we have the connector rules for the data transformation operations like that, and connector rules varied based upon the connector type. Application rules act on the accounts or account groups available for all the connector type, the same rules. Next, finally, define the aggregation task and schedule it. So this is the entire procedure for creating a non-authoritative application in Sailpoint. And you have this application connector processing, you can see, right? So target file system, from the target file system, the connector rules gets executed. First, the connector rules gets executed. Next, application rules gets executed. In the application rule also, first the customization, next correlation. If the correlation is successful, correlated identity cubes will be created. If not successful, uncorrelated identity cubes will be created. So basically, as I just explaining you about the account correlation, right? The match found. So if that employee ID equal to user ID, it means the match is successfully found. If the match is not found successfully, then what will happen? Then also an identity will be created, but that identity will be marked as an orphan account or an uncorrelated account in Sailpoint. So that's kind of an identities also will be present in organization. And these are all the connectors. Okay, application type. These are all the connectors that we have it in Sailpoint. And these are schemas. So we have an account schema, we have a group schema. So account schema is mandatory for every application that you create in Sailpoint. Group schema is completely optional. So for some applications, there will be some kind of a permissions. For some applications, permissions won't be there. So it depends upon what kind of a permission that you have, and what kind of an access that you have, what kind of a permission that you have it in Sailpoint. And this is the account schema that we have already known, right? We created in the authoritative application the same way. Next, you have this account schema, right? So in the account schema, we have it like a managed entitlement and multi-valued fields. If you remember in the previous application onboarding, we have configured one of the attribute property as multi-valued. So apart from, sorry, yeah, cost center, correct, because that contains multiple values, hence we marked it as a multi-valued field. And we have this managed entitlement fields. Other than the multi-valued, we have managed an entitlement. Okay, so what exactly these does? So for example, this particular attribute is storing the entitlements. Okay, we need to tell Sailpoint that just like for cost center, how we have told Sailpoint that it is storing a multi-valued field, same way this particular attribute is storing an entitlements in a non-authoritative application. Hence, we need to tell Sailpoint that groups attribute contains the entitlements. That is one thing. Till there, it's fine. But what is this managed property now? So managed property means like if you mark it as a managed, then this entitlements, whatever the entitlements that are present under the attribute groups will be stored under entitlement catalog. Okay. So see entitlement catalog. If you see the next screenshot, see here. Entitlements means like telling that particular identity has this kind of an entitlement. So input is one of the entitlement name under capability. So it will be displayed under the identity cube. Whereas if you mark it as a managed field, so all the entitlements, whatever the entitlements you marked it under the managed field, all the application entitlements will be getting stored and will be getting stored under the what do you say, entitlement catalog or repository. Okay, entitlement catalog is a repository where all the entitlements would be stored. So that is the intention of putting this managed and entitlement checkboxes. And if you have a group data, so group data will be passed under what do you say, group data would be passed with without putting this managed field. Next. So group schema, use it to support a native account group model. So provides framework for defining what group membership really means. I'm a member of group 920 I can access the financial planning file share. I'm a member of Active Directory Group VPN, hence I can log into the corporate VPN. For example, in India, we have like Amazon Prime membership. Okay, I have an Amazon account. Okay, if I have a permission of a prime access, then I'll be having a prime access data. So similar way you can understand. So these are kind of a permissions. Some applications will be having a direct data like YouTube or Google browser. You don't have any kind of an permission kind of thing to access something. Whereas for Netflix or Amazon Prime, you need to pay for something. So like that. So then you will be getting a permission for to access those content. So groups managed in entitlement catalog. So groups are directly managed. So you don't need to specially mark them as a managed field. Remember. So for this, if the data containing the groups, you don't need to mark it like a managed field. We in the previous slide for entitlements, we have marked like entitlement managed, right? So for groups, we don't need to mark it like a managed field if you have a group data. If you don't have a group data, only account schema is there, then you must mark it like a managed field. So generally permissions are direct, group based permissions are indirect permissions, we call it as. Okay, next is the account schema. So this is how we'll be marking it as a group if you have a group schema configured. So that I'll show you practically. Here you may not understand, but when I show it practically, you may understand. So non-authoritative application, this is how the correlation happens. So employee ID equal to employee ID, you can see, right? So this is the account correlation that we are mapping. If I just open a notepad and show you how these things work, if anyone doesn't understand how correlation works means. Okay, let me just type in. So basically we have like employee ID, first name, last name. Okay. For example, like this, the data is there. Like this, authoritative data is there. So non-authoritative data, user ID, full name, and some entitlement data. Okay, this is the heading. So here user ID is 123. Full name is Sushant dot test. Entitlement some alpha comma beta. Okay, so this is the authoritative application data and this is the non-authoritative applications data. Okay, so the correlation logic will be like this: user ID equals to this employee ID. That is the correlation logic that I am putting in. Okay, when these two things gets matched, then the correlation will be successful. In there will some kind of a case, some name, some entitlement. Okay, this is kind of a details is there. So this triple two is not there in the authoritative system. Hence this identity will be created, but this identity will be created as an uncorrelated identity. Okay, just like an orphan account which is of no use. Okay, a new identity will be created called as a orphan account. Okay, so orphan account means he cannot do anything in Sailpoint like that. Okay, he is just part of this application, but he cannot operate anything because he is not an original identity. So this identity may be some kind of an details like in your organization, you may be seeing like info at the rate xyz.com, support at the rate xyz.com. So these are all are inhuman accounts. So you can consider these inhuman accounts are also called as service accounts or orphan accounts, whatever that you can call it, because those data won't be present in the HR system. HR system only contains the human data, okay, employee data or the original trusted data. Okay, so this is how an authoritative and non-authoritative difference you will be seeing. Next, so this is how we'll be marking the correlation and we'll be saving it. When these two gets equal, then only the correlation happens. If not, uncorrelated identities will be getting created. So this is how we'll be putting. Next, come to the manual correlation. So manual correlation means like if the correlation logic didn't work, okay, and there is an identity in Sailpoint. For example, this is a kind of an identity is present, but due to some mismatch, like this, the data is there. So this triple two is not matching here, but this identity is originally existing actually. Okay, but due to the mismatch of the employee ID, the correlation didn't happen. So there are two ways. Either we can manually correlate this particular account to this identity, or else you can request your client to correct this data. So here actually the data will be correct only. Here the data is wrong. Okay, you can ask your client to correct this particular data and then you can correlate. So we are learning about the manual correlation. So manual correlation means manually if you want to correlate this account to the original identity cube. Okay, that is what mentioned over here. Okay, that is one configuration. We can manually select the user and we can manually select the target identity and we can click on a perform merge button. So here there will be a perform merge button in the bottom. So when you click on it, the account get correlated successfully. So this is a manual correlation. And these are the correlation like application rules. So in general, in a non-authoritative application, we'll be writing a correlation rule, customization rule, managed entitlement customization rule. And in an authoritative application, we generally write it like manager correlation rule and creation rule. And this is the point. So whatever that I have discussed till now are kept in these 6 points. So non-authoritative application contains accounts. Application or connector defines what data to read and how to connect. Aggregation task runs. Connector reads accounts, tries to correlate to the existing identity cubes. Positive correlation, add account to the existing cube. Unsuccessful correlation, add account to the new cube. Mark as uncorrelated. This is how the non-authoritative application will be defined. And there is a additional application. The connector rules gets executed. Next application rules. Next correlation. If it's successful, correlated identity cubes. If not, uncorrelated identity cubes. So this is some kind of an data sources that will be monitoring the data. Next, delimited file connector. So we have already learned about what is a delimited file connector, right? Just have added some slides to make you just understand how these things works. So we have a file path, file transport, column header, present or not will be putting in, and delimiter will be putting in. Filtering, I have explained you in the previous session when I was doing the authoritative applications, right? So here we will be learning about a merging concept. So merging generally we observe in a non-authoritative application only. So how exactly merging will happen is, let me just show you this data for you. So you can see this data, right? DBID, first name, last name, and group member. But if you just observe this data, it's only one identity only, but have three entitlements: accounts payable, accounting, and payroll. Okay, three entitlements are assigned to one particular user only. But when we directly pass this data into Sailpoint, Sailpoint will not recognize this as one single identity. It will be understanding like, first this will be considered, next it will be overridden by this particular data, again it will overridden by this particular data, but end of the day it will only consider Bob Smith identity and one payroll entitlement. Remaining two Sailpoint will not be understanding. Okay, so what is our intention? To make Sailpoint understand this one identity have these three entitlements. We need to make Sailpoint understand that. Hence, we will be performing the merging. Okay, there will be some kind of an application. Client will be giving you like only one data, followed by this particular group member value is a multi-valued, and he will be adding these three entitlements into one liner only. Okay, there will be some cases where this other data won't be present. Okay, that's a intention. So if you get this kind of a data, then you will be performing the merging. Next. So how do you configure the merging? You can see this diagram, right? So data needs to be merged. You need to enable it. Once you enable it, the remaining columns will be populated. Index column means the key value. So I'm considering this DBID as a key value. So you can put it here. Data sorted based upon the index column. Yes, mark it. Next, which column should be merged? This particular column. Okay, because this value only has multiple values. These all are common only, right? So this group member attribute only needs to be merged. Now, once you configure this, now how Sailpoint understands is like, Sailpoint will understand like this. Okay, this is how Sailpoint understands once after you perform the merging. Initially, it's a single valued only, but after performing the merging, it will become a multi-valued field. Hence, we will be marking that attribute as a multi-valued field also. So that is how the merging happens in Sailpoint. Any questions in the merging concept, guys?
So, Shashank, like I could see in a one row, right? So for Beastmate, for example, if I wanted to pull a report for this guy, right? So do I get the group member in one line or like three different lines?
If you want to capture a report,
Yeah,
report
if you
means
want
like which report that you want to capture?
uh access for the Beastmate,
The
the group member,
entitlements.
yeah, entitlements, right?
Basically, whatever the data that you have, that will be captured. This configuration that we are doing only for application configuration to make Sailpoint understand in this format. But whatever the report that you capture, it will be captured like in multiple data only, how you have received it in as an input.
Okay, so like three different rows, right? If you take
Right.
you take this one as an example, not in
Yes.
one line.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Because this is only the configuration that we are doing for that specific application.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting to make that application definition complete.
Okay. Got it.
That's how.
Yeah.
Next. These are the connector rules. So connector rules will be varying from one connector to other connector. I'll be explaining more on this connector rules when I come to the rules topic. And this is a delimited file processing. So this diagram is very important for people who are attending the interviews. Why? Because people will be asking, the interviewers would be asking in such a way that can you explain the rule execution in a delimited file connector? So though you are well aware of all the rules, but the order of execution matters over here. Okay, so the first rule that will be executed is the build map rule. Okay, the first connector rules gets executed, next application rules gets executed. In the connector rules also, first the build map rule gets executed, next merge map rules, next the data filtering happens, next map to resource object. So the resource objects will be sent to the application rules, and in the application rules, first the customization rule, next the correlation rule. If the correlation is successful, correlated identities will be created. If not successful, it will be checking for any creation rule that you have written, like to create the identity cube. And finally, an identity cube gets created. So in the notes, you can see here pre-iterate and post-iterate rules will be present. So pre-iterate rule runs once before the aggregation, and post-iterate rule runs once after the aggregation. Okay, and the remaining rules are iterative. So whenever their turn comes, they will be getting executing. But this is the order of execution of rules in a delimited file connector. For every connector, I have kept this processing diagram. So just understand how this is being going in. So in interviewer, people may ask you how the delimited file processing goes, like how a JDBC processing goes, like how an LDAP processing goes, like. So these kind of a questions may be expected. And this is a SQL loader connector. So till now, whatever that we have learned is with a delimited file application. So delimited file application is a kind of a disconnected application in Sailpoint. Okay, disconnected application means like we can only read the data, but we cannot write the data back into a CSV file. Whereas we have some other connectors like a JDBC connector architecture. So this is a read as well as a write connector. So the next connector that we will be learning is the JDBC connector, where we can read the data and we can write the data. So it's a connected application, we call it as. So this is the theoretical content for the non-authoritative applications. So let me just open the Sailpoint and create one application. So now we are going to onboard a non-authoritative application that is named as a finance application. So first let's see the data. So if you just go to SP admins home, implementer training, data, finance users.csv. So if you want to see, this is the data. Okay, so we have here employee ID, DB ID, app to privileged, account login, app to service, app to inactive, group member, username. This is a kind of a data that we have. Okay, so this data we need to pass it into Sailpoint. So here we can take the either DB ID or the employee ID as our primary key value. Okay, and anyhow this employee ID only we will be choosing it for the correlation. That is for sure. This DB-ID, we can choose it for the identity attribute. In the account schema, we will be using it, right? There we can use the DB-ID. And if you just carefully observe these four records, it's only with one record only, one identity information only, but have four different entitlements: accounts payable, accounts receivable, payroll analysis, and plan review. By looking at the data, we can say, right, this particular data requires merging configuration. So like that, first you need to analyze the data that is given to you, and then you need to put it on Sailpoint. So let's open a new application, click on add new application, create a new application like finance application. I'm giving it owner, you can give it. I'm giving administrator. Application type I'm giving as something delimited file. So it's not an authoritative, right? Hence I'm not selecting any checkbox here. Go to configuration, give the file path, just double tap on it and you will be getting the older file paths, where you can give the file path of this file. And delimiter is comma. File has column header in the first line. Go to schema, discover schema attributes first. So this is the data that we got it, right? So this DB-ID only I'm just considering as the identity attribute, and display attribute, any name you can put it. So we have a name called this username attribute is there. Put it over here. Done. And this group member contains the entitlements, right, that we have just saw. So on the group member property, we need to mark it as an entitlement. And also to store these entitlements in the entitlement catalog repository, you need to mark it as a managed field. And also, as of now, this is not a multi-valued field. If you see, as of now, this is not a multi-valued field, but we are going to perform the merging, right, which will make that attribute as a multi-valued field. Hence, we need to mark it as a multi-valued and save it. Done. Now, if you want to preview your data, you can preview it. Only 4 records will be printed. See, it should at least print the 10 records, right? In fact, it has printed 10 records, but it is showing us as a 4 records only. So how I am saying that is, if you see Richard Jackson and Richard Jackson admin, Maria White and Charles Harris. If you carefully observe this data till here, it's 10 records only. Whereas Richard Jackson has occupying 4 records. Richard Jackson admin 4 records, it is occupied, total 8. Maria White has 1, Charles Harris has 1. But since Sailpoint has overridden this particular data into 1, and Richard Jackson also into 1, Maria White into 1, and Charles Harris also into 1. That is the reason we could only see 4 records. What we are supposed to do, we are going to perform the merging now. So I'm just copying this DB from here. Go to the settings, merging. Data needs to be merged, yes. Paste the DB over here. Data sorted by index column, yes. Ignore case while merging. You don't need to select this checkbox. You can ignore it. Which column should be merged? We need to merge this group member column. So go to settings, merging, put it over here. Done. Now go to schema. Now do a preview. See, now you got the data for each user for entitlements, like whatever the entitlements that are allocated that are being merged here successfully. This is how. Next important thing is correlation. So click on this correlation. Click on this new button under account correlation. Click on next. Give a name. I'm giving like finance correlation. Click on next. Next. Select the attribute. Here we'll be taking the employee ID. Here also employee ID. So this is the non-authoritative system attribute, and this is the authoritative system attribute. So we are making these both as equal. Click on add button. Click on save. You can click on next and save also. Nothing is there in the next page. So I just saved it. So you should see this message like this: employee ID equal to employee ID. People will forget to click on add button. So make sure you don't forget to click on add button. So once you click on add button, you will be able to see this two details here: employee ID and employee ID. Once you have done, scroll down and save the application. Done. Now, what is the final step? We are supposed to go ahead and run the aggregation task. So before running the aggregation task, if you just go to applications and entitlement catalog, you can see there are no entitlements as of now. But once we run the task, we should see these entitlements over here. Account aggregation. Give a name here. Finance aggregation. Select the applications to scan, finance application, and select the recommended checkboxes. Done. After this, there is one more checkbox that we need to select, that is promote managed attributes. So we marked that group member column as a managed property, right? Since we marked that attribute as a managed property, we are supposed to select this particular checkbox to process those attributes, to process those managed attributes into entitlement catalog. And remember one point over here: entitlement in Sailpoint is also considered as a managed attribute, is also termed as managed attributes. Okay, select this checkbox, scroll down and save and execute. So it's completed. You can open it and check it out. You can see here 80 accounts were scanned, 4 identities got created, and 76 identities got updated. Okay, what does this mean? Can someone tell me what are these 4 identities that are created? 80 were there in the
Orphan
non-authoritative
accounts.
system, right? So these 4 are called as a orphan accounts where the match was not found. Only 76 identities got updated among 80. Okay, and 17 entitlements got successfully created, and in these 17 entitlements, for each user 4 entitlements, 3 entitlements, 1 entitlement, like that they have added, right? Hence the total count went to 122. If you just go to entitlement catalog, you can see all those 17 entitlements listed over here. So these are those entitlements. So this is how a non-authoritative application would be onboarded into Sailpoint. If you just go to the application also, you can see that identities who are part of this application. Click on the application and go to the accounts. And you can open any account. For example, I opened this Maria White. You can click on this identity. It will take you to that identity cube. This is the identity cube. So if you just go to application accounts, see this particular user have an account in HR employee where it came from. And also just now we have created one account, which is financial application. That's how you will be validating post the onboarding the data. Cool then, guys. Okay. Bye and take care, guys. Thank you.